Hello and welcome to a Barnardos Australia podcast. My name is Matt Hooey and I'm the Head of Practice and Impact. I'd like to acknowledge that the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' continued connection to land, waters and community. Today we are recording on the land of the Wallumattagal people. Today we're here to talk with Farah Mak, which some of you might know from Neighbours, a well-known Australian actor who is also on a mission to empower the lives of children and young people, particularly with their self-worth. The missions come from an internal personal experience with domestic and family violence. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's an absolute honour to be here and I'm so grateful for your time, Matt.
Absolutely. We're really keen to hear from you and your experience, particularly your lived experience and your journey of healing and how you've come to, I suppose, be able to talk about the experience and then empower other people.
Thank you. Yes. So ask away any questions. I think starting from the beginning, I'm happy to talk about my lived experience and what led me to become an advocate and activist in this sector.
Just a bit about Barnardos. We impact about 14 to 15,000 children and young people and their families across the Barnardos, New South Wales and ACT each year. And an ongoing trend we typically are starting to see and have seen for some time is domestic and family violence, no matter what end of the stick you're at, whether it's early intervention or in out-of-home care, which is in the foster care side of things. But one key thing that continues to come up and our way of approaching our work with helping clients or kids heal from trauma is about self-worth and their identity. So I'm curious to hear from you. You're I suppose from the start to where we are now and what you want to share with how you've been able to shape your experiences to where you are.
Mm-hmm. If I look back and reflect on my own childhood was a beautiful combination of wonder and challenge, I would say. So I look back at little Farah and think she grew up with a lens of magical, sparkly glitter, trying to see the possibility and joy in everything. But running alongside that was a little bit of fear, uncertainty and doubt, which would make me question my own worth. So in hindsight, I look back at my childhood and see that there were themes of family violence there that I didn't recognise as a child, which would affect my own self-worth. And later in life, I guess, is part of what drew me to magnetise the wrong people into my life who would treat me in the wrong way. So that's where the domestic and family violence lived experience really came in as an adult. And the self-worth side of it, I think it's so important for children to learn about self-worth from a young age, to know exactly who they are, what they stand for and what they have to say, and instilling in children that they are worthy of love, worthy of safety, worthy of value and being accepted just because who they are, not for any external validation.
So you mentioned in your childhood that you had picked up on signs that you probably didn't really recognise back then what you're living through. What do you think in society has changed or community has changed in terms of attitudes around violence in the home?
I think first and foremost, back then, abuse in general in the home was a dark hidden secret. So the good thing is that now we're talking about it openly and there's a light shining on what domestic and family violence is. It's not nobody's business because it's behind closed doors. It's everybody's business because it affects everybody. And now we have names for certain behaviours that we didn't understand what were parts of family violence. So we used to think that it was just someone being physically harmed, a punch in the face or something. That's what domestic and family violence would look like back in my youth. And again, I would say that was almost normalised because it was nobody else's business. So now it's everyone's business and we're all talking about it. But we have an insight and understanding now around things that are drivers that lead to that physical violence that, in my personal opinion, are much harsher, and that's gaslighting, coercive control, love bombing, all the little red flags that actually leave a deep scar and the deep emotional trauma. The impact can last much longer than any sort of physical harm.
Yeah, it really does shape your experiences as a kid, having all those different elements in your life, because it can confuse how you relate to people as you become older and become adults. And then what we then see is I suppose, the cycle of then finding someone who is someone that you've maybe grown up with or has perpetrated abuse, essentially. That's a hard thing to go through as a child. Did you have any, I suppose, internal strengths or attributes that you really relied on to help give you a voice and help your self-worth and empowerment?
I drew on my creativity. So I would write poetry, write stories, and just sort of escape into a little magical world. And that sort of followed me through my life. I once had someone say to me, Farah, your rose-coloured glasses are so rosy you would look at a broken down old caravan and see the Taj Mahal. So it's been a strength and a weakness, to be honest. So because I was always looking for the best in people, and the weakness part would be that I would accept less than what I was worthy of. But then the strength is that it builds resilience and helps you to always see the optimal side of things and the positivity and joy.
You're an actor, and that's essentially what your job is, telling a story. So throughout your career, have you relied on storytelling to help amplify domestic violence on a large advocacy scale?
Yes, and I must say for a period there, particularly when I was escaping and healing after that abusive relationship, I lost that ability to storytell because I felt like a completely empty shell. I didn't know who I was. I literally was just like this person that felt empty on the inside. So I didn't know how to storytell anymore. I didn't know how to use my voice. And it wasn't until I started healing and writing. So writing was a powerful thing for me, poetry and writing different forms, creative writing, that I found my voice again through writing. And I realized that through storytelling, I was able to not only heal myself, but heal others. So my voice came about through the creative process of writing again, and then using my voice and seeing that the impact it made to reach other people and how they might connect in with your story in just one small piece. They might not have been a victim of family violence, but something else might have been a trauma in their life that has impacted them, and they can connect in with that piece and then look at you for hope and healing and see, right, if that person can overcome that, I too can overcome that. And you can kind of have that unity in storytelling. To be able to talk from an authentic place is really powerful.
Still, we are hearing less about children being impacted, even though that we know that children are significantly impacted if they are in the home. And it's just this cycle.
I think we need to really focus more on children as direct victims of family violence. I do a lot about empowerment for women because of my own lived experience, but I'm also really passionate about children because they're not being seen, heard, valued enough in the family and federal circuit courts, in schools. There needs to be more trauma-informed practices within schools to recognise the signs. We now also all understand what coercive control, gaslighting, all the things that we've talked about are. So for teachers to be trauma-informed around sort of certain behaviours that a child who is witnessing family violence might display. And that's the important thing, to be able to recognise those signs and for children to know what they're worthy of and how they should be treated, what love looks like, what respect looks like, what a healthy relationship looks like.
And thinking about healthy relationships, what was, if you don't mind sharing, the turning point for you to say, actually, this is not a healthy relationship that I'm in? What was the turning point for you to, I suppose, find that voice?
I think there was so many moments. There wasn't like one big dramatic moment because I stayed for far too long and endured far too much. That faint whisper that kept saying to me, "You are worthy of so much more." Sorry, I'm getting emotional now. But most importantly, looking at my children and seeing their future selves and knowing that I had to be the person to role model what a healthy relationship was, what love really looks like, what respect really looks like, and breaking that cycle for them. So taking them out of that environment so it's not normalised for them, thinking about their lives in the future and who I wanted them to be, what I visualised for them. Yeah. So the turning point wasn't like one dramatic moment, although there were many of those, to be honest. It was that quiet whisper that kept saying, "You are worthy of so much more."
So you'd mentioned that it took you, from your perspective, far too long, and there's a lot of warning signs and red flags left, right and centre. What was your experience of asking for help?
Asking for help was incredibly hard for me. The fear of retaliation, the stigma, the overwhelming shame. And as we've talked about, when you're a victim of family violence, often your self-worth is stripped away. So I felt like I wasn't worthy of help, or nobody would believe me. So it was incredibly hard. I had some certain people in my life who I reached out to who helped build that self-worth back up. So it was friendships and loved ones who believed me and supported me and gave me the courage to then reach out to organisations that helped build that process. And the more I was able to talk about, the safer I felt. And I think that's where, coming back to, it's so important that organisations like yourselves, also the police, ambulance, family and federal circuit courts, magistrates courts, believe victim survivors of family violence, because they've already been through enough emotional overwhelm and trauma and feeling like they're not good enough and they're not worthy to be treated well. So then often there's that re-traumatization in the sector, in the process.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. The re-traumatization, it comes back to that, having to tell your story over and over again.
Safe Steps Family Violence Response Centre in Victoria were a lifeline for me, and that was just one particular woman who was a court support worker in the magistrates court who held my hand, put her arm around me and made me feel like she was a mother figure, made me feel safe and loved. So that was a real turning point for me in feeling safe and loved and valued and heard. Others, I will say, I had some terrible experiences within the family and federal circuit courts. So it was not a linear process, and there were parts that were nurturing and wonderful and helped to empower me to keep moving forward, and others that really were re-traumatizing me and making me feel like I was to blame for the experience.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, when you were going through this process, what was it like for your children? Were people asking about the children specifically? Because we often will hear also that kids are often hidden within the process.
Yes, again, certain organisations were asking about the children. Others weren't, and there was certain aspects of the process that were, again, re-traumatising the children. And I think with children, no matter how much we try and shield them from what's going on, children are actually very intuitive. So they pick up on things, they pick up on energy. So it's really important that we're really focusing in on the kids, and that sectors are taking note of how they're responding, how they're acting, how their behaviours are, to know what sort of trauma that they've been holding from. They might have just seen and heard of it, but seeing and hearing abuse is essentially being a direct victim, especially for a young person.
So Barnardos continues to be a strong advocate in terms of ensuring that children's voices are heard and that they're getting the right supports that are in place. From your perspective, what would have helped you and your kids, or what do you think from your advocacy work and what you've heard would support communities?
Something I'm really passionate about, Matt, is that I really believe there needs to be programs in place to strengthen self-worth in children. So empowerment programs, trauma-informed programs, or a program that is trauma-informed, strengthening self-worth and empowering. And I'd love to see something like this rolled out in schools, family and federal circuit courts. It's something that I'm really passionate about, is that when you walk out of the courts, no matter what the outcome is, you feel lost and afraid and not knowing what to do next. What's the next step? So I've spoken to some leaders within the courts about saying, I think it's your responsibility that you offer an opt-in program to help with the healing and empowerment program, the healing empowerment journey from the next step, rather than just, okay, we're done, off you go, happy life. So I think schools, family and federal circuit courts, organisations like Barnardos and other not-for-profits who support victim survivors of family violence should have self-worth strengthening empowerment programs that are trauma-informed, that really support children and build their sense of identity so they know who they are, that they're loved, safe, valued and heard.
So how did conversations about domestic and family violence, or just violence in general, look in your household, like with your kids?
I think these conversations need to be approached first with honesty, simplicity and reassurance, so the children know that they're not at fault and there's no blame on them and that they are safe, loved and supported. So having that heart-to-heart honest conversation and taking away again that dark scary monster, so being able to just look at their feelings, like name their feelings, being able to put a label on their emotion and have a discussion around what that is. So having that simple, honest, open conversation, but age appropriate, using the right language, and just talking from the heart and feeling okay to add some joy to it. It's okay to add joy and hope in difficult conversations. So have something to look forward to and know that the next steps are exciting and joyful.
That's really interesting. And honesty, safety, they're all really important things, but you've got different age children. So when did you know was the right time to have a conversation?
That's a great question. I don't know if there is a right time. Yeah. It's finding moments. Yeah. Finding moments where, and each child is so different in who they are. We're all so different as human beings. So children have their different personalities and their different ways that they will take in a conversation and what their needs might be, their different healing journeys. So I don't think there's ever a right time. It's finding the right moment with each child. Yeah. With my youngest, he's more open to these heartfelt conversations. So I can find moments where I can go, do you want a little mummy-son chat time and talk about his feelings or how certain things might have affected him, and he's more open to that. But with my teenage daughter, it's really finding that right moment where she's feeling safe and comfortable to open up and express how she's feeling. So rather than the right time, I think my answer to that would be finding the right moments,
the opportunity.
Plural.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we see this particularly with a lot of our services, adolescents that come in. They're juggling everything in life. You say, who am I in school? Who am I on TikTok? If you're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, like essentially we're all competing with that headspace, right? And everything is compounded on top of each other. So that's why I think it's really important you're doing the work on self-worth, because that is a sense of early intervention. If you're starting that early, when they're getting to that adolescent stage, when they're actually trying to find who they are in the world, having these skills and strengths and attributes within that they can rely on is really important.
Absolutely. I think self-worth is the foundation of it all. If you've got a strong sense of self-worth, again, I'll put it down to know who you are, what you stand for and what you want to say, simplifying it, then that is the foundation to a successful, happy, joyful life.
I've done some work in my career actually about self-worth and identity. I do a lot of life story work, therapeutic life story work with kids in out-of-home care. So it's the foster kingship side of things. And that's exactly what I focused on, was the storytelling, your self-worth, and helping kids understand their past experiences, but not only theirs, but their parents and their grandparents, because intergenerational trauma is so significant. And you're absolutely right. The way that you would explain a concept to me would be different to someone else and someone else. It's about going child-led kind of conversations, taking the opportunity. And I found that experience really rewarding, empowering as well, for children to be able to understand in creative, fun ways, I suppose, these large concepts that most adults in society and community don't really understand, and especially brain development on kids. And that process was so healing for those kids, because they were able to see their grandparents, who often had experienced trauma, not everyone, but often had, and then how that led into their mum or dad's experience, and then how that led into their experience. And we focused a lot on that pregnancy side of things. So even before you were born, mum was experiencing these really significant trauma in her life, often being domestic and family violence, And these things, when you're in mummy's tummy, still just maybe because you haven't taken your first breath, doesn't mean it's not impacting you. It's impacting you dramatically. And it's about that, helping them understand it's not as cookie cutter. It's not like, it's everything in your life from your generations in that have been impacted.
Oh, I love that. And it's so powerful. And I love that you speak about the impact on the unborn baby, when you're in mummy's tummy, when mummy's pregnant with you, how you can still take in things and also mummy's emotions and feelings. So understanding that pregnancy is the place where it starts, really in that early intervention stage, because that little baby that's going to be born has already got those belief systems, for lack of a better word, things that have infiltrated into their energy along the way through the pregnancy period. So it's important that we have that prevention and support for pregnant women.
We advocate and we do deliver specific domestic family violence services for young people as well in community, whereas we want to obviously expand that as much as we can, because that is a form of early intervention. Those group work or trainings, facilitation, whatever you want to call it, is all about teaching young people healthy relationships and what a healthy relationship is, so they can pick up on those cues really early, pick up on those red flags, pick up on the coercive control, the manipulation, or just when your stomach doesn't feel right. Like, hang on, something is a little bit off here, but I don't really know how to put my finger on it.
I think that's so important, to understand your intuition, follow your intuition, and for young people and children to understand the red flags. Yeah. So we've talked about coercive control, gaslighting. Love bombing is another one that I didn't understand what that was when I was going through it myself. In hindsight, I realise now that it led to stalking in my personal situation. So seeing all of those things and having those conversations around it, so having a good understanding, and most importantly, like you said, Matt, is following your intuition. When something doesn't feel right, really tune into that.
So we need to think holistically about domestic violence and how we can change it together, being one person at a time. Being that person that gave you that hug and just held you in that space to say, hey, it's okay, you're with me, we can get through this.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Matt. I think you're right. It's that one person. So bringing it back to community. Thank you for bringing that up. That one woman made such an impact on my life that I have been an advocate and activist ever since, because she made me feel safe, loved, heard, valued and worthy. And I thought, I want every person who's experienced domestic and family violence to feel this way. Yeah. So from her planting that little seed of love, that's what created me to be this advocate. And I see all these other people out there doing the work through their own healing and empowerment.
What do you think are some of the impacts that we might not be seeing in the community?
I think a lot of the invisible underlying things that we need to be aware of and not obvious is that often children who have been around domestic and family violence, their confidence and sense of self has been eroded. So leaving them questioning who they are in the world and feeling unworthy and not really knowing their importance. And that can build up into things like anxiety, depression, behavioural problems. And as we grow up, perfectionism, being unable to trust relationships or being able to attract healthy relationships. So those little silent, invisible things that we might not recognise at the beginning, just like a subtle thing, like a child questioning who they are in the world, can carry through with them their whole lifetime. So I think that's why it's really important with that prevention piece and that understanding around what are these silent, invisible effects on children, and not just looking at, oh, there's a naughty kid right there, why are they being naughty? Looking at the underneath the surface and going, what's that child been through? What's led to that behaviour? And helping to then find solutions for it and wrap them up in love to help them heal, so they're not carrying that through for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. I think that's really important as well, because I think what we would often see in our Barnardos centres are families asking for support, which is fantastic, and some of it can be about children's behaviours. And I worked in out-of-home care. I'd often get teachers calling me saying, this has happened in the classroom today. But it's really encouraging people to look beyond the behaviour, look much deeper, and being trauma informed of thinking, hang on, this child is telling you something. This child is absolutely telling you something. You need to look beyond that and provide that opportunity, or take the opportunity to give them a voice by asking them the critical questions, which I think, I don't know about you, but society still, I think, struggles to ask the really pointy end questions, particularly with domestic and family violence, because it's such an uncomfortable topic for so many people.
Which is so important that we take away that stigma and the uncomfortableness and just be able to have a conversation about it. And going from what you're saying about teachers being trauma-informed, but even parents, so a broader community understanding and educational piece around trauma-informed understanding. So, even as a parent, now that I have got that trauma-informed approach, I haven't always had it. It helps me to understand my children, other children's behaviour. So it's actually easier for me to be able to know how to handle things when I see things that are outside the norm, for example. And I think also for teachers, like I've had teachers along the way saying about my children, oh, they're misbehaving, they've been doing this, been doing that. They're just kind of like suddenly going into emergency, I don't know what to do, bam, hit the button, instead of looking under the surface and knowing, there's something there that just needs a little bit more love and tender loving care in how we approach this. So it takes that pressure not only off the child, but also the adult who's handling it. Like if you've got that trauma-informed understanding, you don't feel like you're having to suddenly fix something. You know how to resolve it in a more nurturing, loving, holistic approach.
Time and time again, we hear that when a woman becomes pregnant, that is one of the most critical and dangerous times for them in a domestic and family violent relationship for many, many factors. And that's that they're still children. And it's still impacting them for their lifetime to come. Yeah.
So that's where Barnardos' work is so important, and thank you for what you do. So I think back to my own experiences and how alone and afraid I felt at times. So the more we can talk about, Barnardos are there to help you through pregnancy, through every part of the way, and the support that you give children is life-changing.
Yeah. So I believe you've got a book called I'm Worthy that you've written, and it's all about empowering women and girls.
So I Am Worthy came about from a poem I wrote many years ago called She Shines, which was in my own healing journey. It was a poem written about a woman who goes on a journey to rediscover her self-worth, essentially my own journey. But I wrote that one day while sitting on a train, watching people come and go, and this beautiful young woman boarded my carriage. And I thought, wow, she's really beautiful. But then something stopped me and captivated me with her, that I could see or sense the brokenness within. So it was almost like a mirror reflecting back all my little broken parts within, with the fear, the shame, the insecurity. And that's when the creativity became my healing foundation. I wrote She Shines that day, and I had a very clear vision to turn She Shines into a film to help heal and empower others. But it took me, as we talked about, the healing journey wasn't linear, so it took many years to adapt that poem into a film. And I finally did that. It's still work in progress. But from She Shines as the foundation, I launched the Self-Worth Movement, which is a mission to educate, inspire and empower people about the value and profound importance of self-worth. And my focus has mostly been on women survivors to this point, but I have now just launched the Sparkle Squad Girls, which is all a prevention piece. And the Sparkle Squad Girls teach children about their core values and essentially what self-worth is. So the very first book is I Am Worthy, and that is coming out in the new year, and it's about a girl named Worthy, and she takes you on a journey to learn about self-worth, and it's done in a kind of modern fairy tale way to make it fun and engaging, again bringing that light and sparkle, but for children to find their own hero within. So you become the hero of your own fairy tale.
You have these affirmation cards, these beautiful self-worth affirmation cards. What do you say we do one?
Yeah.
All right. Well, first one off Capital Rank is optimism.
Oh.
So how's that?
Yeah.
I'm going to hand this to you. You want to put it on your heart? What are you feeling optimistic about in terms of domestic and family violence, community awareness, attitudes, or just your own journey?
I'm very optimistic right now about community in general, that we're having the conversation and taking away that dark, scary monster, understanding that it's something that is everyone's business and everybody's responsibility. I'm really optimistic about organisations like Barnardos, who are trailblazing the way to bring transformational change and hope and healing to families to help break the cycle. I'm super optimistic about advocates that are out there using their pain and turning it into purpose and sharing their stories and using their voices to pave the path for other people for healing and light. And again, educating around the red flags to stop people from continuing on that cycle.
So thank you for coming along and advocating strongly for kids and their voice and sharing your story. It's not easy to do, so I really admire your vulnerability and the drive to share your story to really empower other people in the community or whoever's going to be listening.
Oh, thank you. It's been an honour to be here with you, Matt, and I'm very grateful for you and all the work that Barnardos are doing. And I hope that this piece inspires others to share their story and empower themselves on their own healing journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you require any support, immediate support, please contact 1-800-RESPECT, or if you're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, you're able to contact 13 Yarn for some cultural support.